"You can't survive our selection, right, human pilot?" she warned. "He's still breathing." 3 days later, the Starling bucked violently as it tore through the ochre clouds of Lyrae, its hull groaning under the stress of entry. Marcus Lane's gloved hands locked around the trembling yoke, sweat beading under his helmet as he fought to keep the battered reconnaissance ship level. Red lights flashed across the cracked console, oxygen venting, power draining, inertial dampeners failing. He cursed, voice drowned by the rising roar of atmospheric friction. The ground surged closer through the forward viewport, a patchwork of rust and copper under the clouds, the world spinning as his ship spiraled out of control. "Come on, you bastard, hold together," Marcus snarled, forcing the nose up, fighting the shuddering roll. The controls went slack in his hands. The Starling spun, caught in a cyclone of alien wind. Gravity yanked him sideways as the cockpit filled with alarms. Marcus braced for the crash, jaw clenched, and watched as the world turned red, then black, a final splinter of sky searing his memory before the impact slammed him into oblivion. Silence. Then, the chill of stone beneath his cheek, and the muffled sound of a breeze whispering through rock spires. Marcus groaned, pushing up on his elbows, mind reeling. He tasted blood, felt bruises blossoming across his ribs, and forced his eyes to focus. A woman crouched beside him. Not Terran, not even human in the usual sense. Her olive-toned synthetic skin caught the first rays of dawn and shimmered with an almost metallic sheen. A beauty mark, dark as ink, accented her right eye. Chestnut waves of hair spilled over her shoulders, framing sharp cheekbones and full lips. Gold filaments flickered in her irises, and metallic ports traced the elegant curve of her jaw and neck. A sleek black exoskeleton hugged her athletic form, plates shifting with each subtle movement. "You survived," she said, voice musical. Strange, but not unpleasant. Curiosity warred with caution in her tone. "I am Sira of the Nithari. You have crashed within the proving fields." Marcus blinked, chest heaving. "Marcus Lane, Terran Federation." He gestured to the wreckage scattered over the ochre earth, his mouth twisting in a wry smile. "My ship's not flying again any time soon." Sira regarded him, head tilted. The dawn light danced in her gold-flecked eyes. "Your arrival is timely. The selection rites have just begun." "Selection rites?" Marcus tried to push himself upright, only to wince as pain lanced through his shoulder. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "The Nithari's highest honor is at stake. 10 trials, for those who wish to stand among us. Refusal is not permitted. Survival is not guaranteed." He glanced around. The proving fields were a maze of jagged rocks and twisted alien flora, the air tinged with metallic scents and distant echoes. The ship's smoking hull was half buried in the sand beyond repair. He looked back at Sira, calculating. "What happens if I say no?" She shrugged, graceful and unsettling. "Exile, or something worse." Marcus considered. "If I accept, what's the first trial?" Sira's expression shifted, something unreadable in her gaze. Without warning, she produced a small, wriggling larva from a pouch at her hip. The creature glistened, translucent and veined, its mouth parts flickering. Before Marcus could protest, she pressed it to the side of his neck. A burning jolt shot through him, liquid fire racing along his veins, igniting every nerve ending. Marcus gasped, hands clawing at the stone as the Selnar venom took hold. His vision swam, the world flickering in and out of focus. He fought the convulsions with everything his training had taught him, locking down his breathing, slowing his heart, forcing his muscles to obey. Sira watched, amber eyes narrowing. Sweat poured down Marcus's face. The agony built, stretched on, every second a lifetime. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. At last, the pain dulled to a throb. Marcus lay on his side, breathing ragged but steady, the venom's fire cooling in his blood. Sira's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Most don't last a minute against the venom of the Selnar. He managed a crooked grin, hiding the tremor in his voice. I've had rougher landings. She chuckled, a low, musical sound. Perhaps you will survive the next trial. As night fell, the air thickened with unfamiliar scents, sharp, floral, tinged with something wild. The sky above blazed with alien constellations, and shadows crept over the stones. Syrah rose, her silhouette outlined in the starlight, and gestured to a sheltered nook between two boulders. Rest now, Marcus Lane. Dawn will bring the next challenge. He settled gingerly against the cool stone, exhaustion pulling at his bones. For a long moment, he watched Syrah as she scanned the horizon, her gaze sharp and searching. Then, as the alien breeze shifted, she looked back at him. Her expression softened, curiosity mingling with something warmer, something almost tender beneath the starlight. Marcus let his eyes drift closed, feeling her presence nearby. An enigma, a guardian, and perhaps, just perhaps, an ally. Twin moons set as the sun rose over a stone amphitheater, where Marcus stood surrounded by armored Nithari. The air shimmered with anticipation. The stone tiers crowded with figures in iridescent armor, their faces both strange and beautiful in the growing light. Nithari voices swelled and echoed off the ancient stone, a cacophony of curiosity and wager, their words a blend of musical tones and sharp clicks. Marcus felt every gaze on him, a Terran outsider, standing unarmed among warriors bred for endurance and cunning. The amphitheater was carved from the ochre bedrock of Lyrae, its vast circle open to the dawning sky. Sunlight spilled in, catching on the polished breastplates and metallic filaments threaded through Nithari hair. Syrah was there on the sidelines, watching with an intensity that made Marcus's skin prickle. A hush fell as Elder Rin emerged. She was regal, her bearing commanding, silver tattoos tracing the lines of her high cheekbones and angular jaw. Her cloak, woven with shimmering scales, rustled softly as she strode to the center, her staff ringing against the flagstones. She surveyed Marcus, eyes cool and appraising. Marcus Lane of Terra, she intoned, her voice carrying through the arena. The second trial is the trial of endurance. You will withstand the heat of Lyrae's midday sun, with no shelter and no water. Only when the sun dips will you be released. Should you fall, you forfeit your place among us. A ripple of excitement ran through the Nithari. Some eyed Marcus with open skepticism, others with predatory amusement. A few, like the young woman Lyra with her coppery skin and hopeful eyes, seemed to root for him. Marcus glanced at Syrah. Her expression was guarded, but he caught the faintest hint of concern beneath her steady gaze. He gave her a crooked grin, as if to reassure them both. The sun crept higher, its light sharpening, the sky deepening to a brilliant blue-violet. Already, heat radiated from the stone under Marcus's boots. He shrugged off his flight jacket, folding it and tying the sleeves around his neck and arms to guard against the worst of the burn. Sweat trickled down his spine. He studied the wreck of the Starling at the edge of the field, scorched, twisted, but not entirely useless. As the Nithari retreated to the shaded stands, Marcus strode to the ruined fuselage. Elder Rin's eyes narrowed, but she gave no protest. Perhaps she was curious, or perhaps she wanted to see him try. Marcus pried loose a set of reflective panels, their edges still hot to the touch. He carried them back to the center and began assembling a makeshift awning, propping it up with lengths of torn strut and wiring from his ship. Every movement drew a fresh chorus of murmurs from the crowd. Some laughed, mocking his improvisation. Others fell silent, watching with narrowed eyes. Syrah, standing apart from the others, watched him with growing intrigue. Her arms were folded across her chest, but her gaze had softened, skepticism giving way to something like respect. As the sun climbed, the temperature soared. The amphitheater became an oven, the air rippling with heat. Marcus crouched beneath his patchwork shelter, jaw clenched as sweat pooled in the hollows of his collarbone. Every so often, he repositioned the panels, maximizing the sliver of shade. His mouth was dry, his tongue thick. The heat pressed in, relentless. Hours dragged by. Time became a blur of throbbing pain, of sand and stone, and the distant drone of Nithari voices. Marcus forced himself to move, small, deliberate actions to keep his blood flowing, his mind sharp. He tore strips from his undershirt, wrapping them around his wrists, and shifted the jacket over the most exposed skin. He remembered survival training on the deserts of Mars, the lesson drilled into him: keep your core cool, ration your strength, never let the thirst drive you to madness. At intervals, the Nithari sentinels would pass by, their armor glinting, eyes unreadable behind mirrored visors. Some jeered, others watched impassively. Lyra, the young Nithari woman, met his gaze with open admiration, biting her lip as if willing him to endure. Syrah's eyes lingered on him too, though her face betrayed little. Marcus saw her lips press together whenever he staggered, her hand tightening around the hilt of her ceremonial blade. As the day stretched on, her stance grew rigid, the lines of worry visible in the set of her jaw. The sun reached its zenith. The world dissolved into light and shimmering heat. Marcus's vision blurred, his limbs heavy as lead. He forced himself to think of icy rivers on Terra, of rain on metal rooftops, of the way his sister used to tease him about his stubborn streak. He clung to those memories, using them as armor. By the time the sun began its slow descent, Marcus's lips were cracked, his breath ragged. He crouched in the scant shade, blinking sweat from his eyes, aware of the crowd's restlessness. Lyra cheered for him now, joined by a handful of others. Elder Rin watched from her high seat, her face unreadable. At last, as the first cool breeze swept across the arena and the sun slid behind the distant peaks, Elder Rin rose. Her voice rang out, clear and final. Marcus Lane endures. The Terran is victorious. A murmur of surprise rippled through the Nithari. Some cheered, others looked away, discomfited. Lyra ran down from the stands, her smile bright. Syrah was the first to reach him, her movements brisk and purposeful, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of relief. She knelt beside Marcus, uncorking a slender flask. The container was crafted from some strange, iridescent metal, cool against his fevered skin. She pressed it to his lips, her fingers steady on his hand. The water, crisp, clean, tinged with a faint floral note, washed away the sand and fire in his throat. Syrah's hand lingered on his, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. Her voice dropped, meant only for him. Adaptation is your strength. Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze. The gold filaments in her eyes shimmered in the fading light. He managed a tired, lopsided smile. Stubbornness, mostly, he replied, voice rough with exhaustion and something softer beneath. Their eyes held for a moment, a silent conversation pulsing between them. Recognition, gratitude, the spark of something that could grow in the cracks between hardship and hope. A hush fell between them. Syrah rose, helping Marcus to his feet. Lyra hovered nearby, pride clear on her face, her admiration unguarded. Around them, the Nithari began to disperse, their interest shifting to whispered speculation about the next trial. Marcus leaned heavily on Syrah as they made their way from the arena, his strength depleted but his spirit undimmed. The sun had set, and shadows stretched long and cool across the proving fields. Syrah walked beside him, silent but present, her body language protective. Once, her hand brushed his arm in reassurance, a fleeting touch that lingered long after it ended. That night, Marcus found a patch of smooth stone beneath the alien sky. Exhaustion threatened to pull him under, but he resisted, eyes drawn to the constellations swirling above, a pattern unfamiliar yet strangely comforting. The night air was alive with distant calls, scents of wildflowers and minerals drifting on the breeze. Somewhere nearby, Syrah kept silent vigil. He could sense her presence, a steady, unwavering anchor at the edge of his awareness. She watched over him not as a warden, but as a guardian, perhaps even a friend. The trials of the Nithari had only just begun, but something had shifted between them. A fragile trust, a hint of promise beneath the vast and indifferent stars. At dawn, the jagged spires of the Kynar cliffs loomed, their black silhouettes cutting into the molten sky. The Nithari had gathered at the cliff's base, their voices hushed in anticipation, armor flashing silver and gold in the newborn sunlight. Marcus stood at the edge of shadow, his gaze tracing the sheer vertical face rising above, pitted and ancient, with barely a suggestion of footholds. Elder Rin's voice broke the morning stillness. The third trial. Ascend the Kynar cliffs. Reach the summit before the sun reaches its peak, or forfeit your claim. The Nithari watched Marcus, some with open skepticism, others with the flicker of excitement reserved for a spectacle. Marcus appraised the climb. The cliff stretched upward, its stone weathered by wind and time, fissures snaking unpredictably. He flexed his fingers, the aches from the endurance trial still radiating in his joints. "No tools?" he asked, glancing at Syrah. "Only what you possess," Syrah replied. Her tone was even, but something warm flickered in her eyes. Marcus nodded, shifting into the methodical focus of a pilot confronted with an unfamiliar system. He returned to the Starling's battered hull, rummaging through what little remained. He stripped lengths of high-tensile cabling from the flight panel, threading them through fragments of harness webbing salvaged from the seat restraints. It was crude but functional, a makeshift harness, loops for hands and feet, and a length of line to tether him if he slipped. As he prepared, Syrah materialized beside him, silent as a shadow. She stood close, her presence grounding, and Marcus felt a sudden pulse of gratitude for her company. She leaned in, voice low and meant only for him. Halfway up, near the twisted arch, the rock is unstable. The old paths are gone. Test your holds before you trust them. He met her eyes, reading the concern she no longer bothered to hide. "I appreciate the warning," he said. "I'll keep my eyes open." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his forearm. "Return safely, Marcus Lane. The trials are not worth your life." He grinned, though his heart beat faster. "I've survived worse. At least this time I have someone watching my back." Syrah's lips twitched in response, her gaze lingering. Then she stepped back, nodding once. The climb began with a leap. Marcus wedged his boot into a narrow seam, tested the first handhold, and began to ascend. Each movement was deliberate, muscles burning as he hauled his weight upward. The sun's warmth grew steadily, heating the rock beneath his palms. Sweat beaded on his brow, threatening to sting his eyes. Below, Syrah watched, her figure a dark silhouette against the pale stone. Marcus found himself listening for her voice, taking comfort in the knowledge that she was there, alert for danger. The cliff's face offered little in the way of mercy. Marcus shifted his weight, using the cable harness for balance, anchoring himself at each ledge before searching for the next hold. His breath grew ragged, forearms trembling as he moved higher. Midway up, the stone changed. Just as Syrah had warned, a broad overhang blocked the path, its surface crumbling to dust beneath his fingers. Marcus paused, heart hammering, sweat stinging his eyes. He tested a hold, and the rock disintegrated in his grip. Below, Syrah called up, her voice crisp and reassuring. "Left, Marcus. There's a crack behind the red lichen. It's narrow, but it will hold." He adjusted, reaching for the indicated crack. His fingers slid into the fissure, knuckles scraping on jagged edges. He braced, shifted his center of gravity, and swung up and over the overhang. For an instant, his foot slipped, his body dangling in open air. Adrenaline surged. He clung, teeth gritted, then hauled himself onto the next ledge, chest heaving. "Good!" Syrah shouted, her voice ringing with pride. Marcus found a moment to look down. The world below was dizzying. Nithari faces turned upward, Syrah's figure radiating encouragement. He pressed on, mind empty of everything but the rhythm of breath and movement. The final stretch was a vertical sprint. The sun burned at his back, the summit tantalizingly close. He forced aching muscles to comply, leveraging his weight, remembering the balance of a cockpit under stress. At last, his hand closed over the rim of the summit. With a final grunt, Marcus heaved himself up, sprawling atop the wind-scoured plateau. He rolled onto his back, gasping, eyes squeezed shut. The air here was thinner, cooler, laced with the scent of mineral and ozone. When he opened his eyes, Syrah stood beside him. She had taken a different path, her ascent silent, as if the cliffs themselves recognized her as kin. They stood together, gazing out over the alien landscape. Endless mesas rolled to the horizon, rivers of glassy stone winding through the valleys, and in the distance, crystalline towers glittered in the morning sun. The world was both beautiful and strange, promise and peril entwined. Syrah watched him, her amber eyes searching his face. "You find beauty here, Marcus?" He breathed in the view, letting the alien wind cool his skin. "I see resilience," he replied, voice low. "A world that endures, and people who refuse to yield. That's more beautiful than anything I've known." Their eyes met, the connection between them growing, trust deepening into respect, respect blossoming into something warmer. Syrah's expression softened, the guarded distance between them shrinking. The moment lingered, charged and unspoken. Then the sound of drums echoed from below, a signal that the next trial awaited. Together, they began their descent, moving in silent accord down the far side of the cliffs. The path led them into the Miralith, a labyrinthine network of living vines, their emerald coils shifting and pulsing with an inner luminescence. The entrance gaped wide, a maw of tangled green, the air thick with the perfume of pollen and the faintest electric tingle. "This is the fourth trial," Syrah explained as they stood before the labyrinth's entrance. "The Miralith responds to thought, to emotion. Those who panic are lost. Only wisdom and calm can see you through." Marcus studied the shifting walls, noting how the vines contracted and expanded with every breath. "So it's a maze with a mind of its own," he mused. "I'll treat it like a navigation puzzle." He ripped a strip from his shirt, knotting it around his nose and mouth to filter the pollen. The fabric was already damp with sweat. He marked their route by tying bits of colored wiring from his harness onto the vines at each junction, creating a path of breadcrumbs through the ever-changing corridors. The passages narrowed and widened unpredictably, forcing Marcus and Syrah to move in tandem, at times shoulder to shoulder, at times pressed together by the constricting vines. The labyrinth tested them with false turns and shifting walls, the scent of the pollen growing stronger, dizzying. At one tight bend, Marcus felt a sudden sting. He looked down to see a sharp thorn had torn through his sleeve, blood welling from a shallow scratch. Syrah reacted instantly, pulling him aside into a patch of stable ground. Her hands were gentle as she dabbed a viscous, greenish salve from a vial on his wound, her touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. "You're a distraction," Marcus admitted, breath catching as her fingers brushed his skin. "Every time you look at me, I lose my focus." Syrah's lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Perhaps that's my advantage. You're not the only one being tested." Their laughter mingled, echoing through the living corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with approval, the path ahead widening. At the labyrinth's heart, they entered a chamber bathed in silver light. Vines parted to reveal a pedestal, atop which rested a luminous shard, a fragment of crystal pulsing with inner fire. Marcus stepped forward, plucking the shard free. Its light danced across his palms, cool and strangely comforting. He turned to Syrah, holding up the trophy. "What does this mean?" he asked, voice soft, the weight of the moment pressing in. Sira stepped closer, her amber eyes reflecting the shard's glow. "Wisdom earned through hardship," she replied, her tone rich with meaning. She reached out, her fingers brushing his as she closed his hand around the crystal. The distance between them shrank, their shared triumph drawing them closer still. For a long, charged moment, they stood in the labyrinth's luminous heart, the world beyond forgotten, and something new and undeniable growing between them. The ceremonial chamber glowed with bioluminescent patterns, waves of turquoise and violet pulsing along the vaulted ceiling, the light casting intricate shadows over the ancient glyphs carved into the stone. Marcus stood at the center of a shallow dais, the air thick with incense, watched by a ring of elders in flowing metallic robes. The murmurs of the assembled Nithari faded as Elder Rin approached, carrying a slender goblet filled with swirling, iridescent liquid. Sira's presence caught Marcus's attention from the edge of the circle. Her posture was tense, the lines of her exoskeleton tight across her shoulders. She held his gaze, and he read the worry in her amber eyes, a silent warning that this trial would be unlike any before. "The vision trial," Elder Rin intoned, her voice echoing off the chamber walls. "Drink, and the truth of your spirit will be revealed. Only those who endure may continue." Marcus accepted the goblet, its surface cool and slick against his palm. He glanced one more time at Sira, drawing strength from her silent support, then tipped the vessel to his lips. The liquid was thick, bitter, and sweet at once, tinged with the taste of metal and something ancient. The world shifted instantly. Light fractured, sound warped. Visions surged through him, planets igniting in stellar fire, empires rising from dust only to be swept away by war and famine. He saw himself among them, a soldier, a leader, a lone figure walking raised fields and empty streets. Each vision struck with the force of memory, vivid and wrenching. A city collapsed under a blood-red sky. A field of glass where forests once stood. A child's laughter, cut short by sirens. Marcus staggered, heart hammering. Shadows swarmed at the edge of his sight, whispering his failures, his doubts. But Marcus's mind, trained to analyze and endure, did not surrender. He forced himself to slow his breathing, isolating each image, searching for the seams. The colors were too sharp, the voices too insistent. Patterns emerged, subtle repetitions, a push to despair rather than reflection. The trial was meant to break his spirit, not test its strength. He caught flickers of movement in the periphery of the visions. The elders, Rin and another, their faces distorted by the dreamscape, stood together, their voices warped and greedy. "He is too clever. He must be broken before the final rite," Rin hissed, her form flickering like a faulty transmission. "Sabotage the trial. If he fails, we maintain control," the other replied. Marcus forced himself awake, teeth gritted. The chamber resolved into focus, the visions thinning to ghosts at the edge of his senses. Sweat ran down his brow. He slumped to his knees, breathing hard. Sira was at his side in an instant, heedless of protocol. She knelt, her features etched with worry, one hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, what did you see?" He leaned close, voice rough. "The visions, they're not pure. The elders are manipulating them. They want me to break, not to learn. They're sabotaging the trials." Her shock was immediate, her eyes wide with disbelief and anger. "Are you certain?" "I heard them. They fear losing control, Sira." "This isn't just a test of worthiness. It's a test of obedience. They want a champion they can shape, not one who thinks for himself." Sira's gaze hardened, her jaw set. "Then we must show the others the truth. The trials were never meant to be corrupted." Marcus nodded, feeling resolve ignite. "We need proof. If we can expose them, the system can be changed." "Come with me," Sira urged, helping him to his feet. They slipped from the chamber's far exit, vanishing into the maze of corridors before the elders could notice. They made their way through winding halls, the glow of the ceremonial chamber fading behind them. Syrah led Marcus along secret paths, pausing to listen at intersections, always moving with feline grace. They paused outside a council antechamber, where slivers of light spilled through a carved screen. The voices of the elders filtered through, low and conspiratorial. "They are afraid, Syrah," Marcus whispered, as they listened to the elders' plot. "They see change as a threat, not a hope." Syrah's face was pale with fury and shame. "I helped build this system. I believed it was just." "It can be again, but not if we let them decide who survives and who fails," Marcus said gently. They gathered what evidence they could. Overheard conversations, records of altered trials, and Syrah's own testimony. Each piece was another crack in the edifice of the elders' authority. By twilight, Syrah led Marcus deep into the oldest part of the enclave, to a hidden alcove carved into the living stone. The chamber was small, its walls smoothed by generations of secret use. Bioluminescent moss glimmered faintly, casting a gentle blue-green glow. Syrah hesitated at the entrance, the weight of memory heavy on her shoulders. "This was my sanctuary as a child," she said softly, "where I dreamed of changing the world. Now it's the only place I feel safe from the system I helped create." Marcus sat beside her on the smooth stone bench, the silence between them thick with shared vulnerability. He watched as Syrah stared into the moss-lit shadows, her hands trembling. "I regret my part in this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I followed the elders. I believed in the trials. Now I see how many have suffered, how many have been cast out, not for failure, but for defiance." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "We can't undo the past, Syrah, but we can change what comes next. You're not alone in this." She turned to him, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Slowly, she traced the scars on his chest, reminders of battles survived, of pain endured. Her touch lingered, warm and searching. "You've become more than a challenger to me, Marcus. You see with clarity, adapt with heart. I want to believe in something better, something more than tradition or pride." Marcus squeezed her hand, drawing her closer. "Then let's do this together, this. Whatever it takes." She laughed softly, the sound a balm to the darkness. "Together, then." The distance between them dissolved. Trust, built in fragments through trials and danger, blossomed into something deeper, intimacy rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and hope. Syrah leaned into Marcus, her forehead resting against his, their breaths mingling. For the first time, the scars of their pasts felt like shared ground, not isolation. That night, they lay side by side in the alcove, their bodies entwined, Syrah's hand finding his in the darkness. The chamber was a haven against the storms outside, a place where secrets could be spoken and new vows forged. In silence, they promised each other to fight for truth and for each other, their partnership tempered in adversity, a bond stronger than any trial. At dawn, Marcus and Syrah moved with purpose through the waking enclave, the pale light casting long shadows across ancient stone and bioluminescent growths. The air was crisp, their breaths visible as they hurried toward their first destination, a cluster of tangled vines near the trial grounds. Marcus's heart pounded with adrenaline and anticipation. There would be no turning back after this. Syrah knelt beside a patch of myrrhlyth, her deft fingers extracting a thorn glistening with residue. "The toxin," she said quietly, offering it to Marcus. "No natural vine carries this strength. The elders modified it for the trial." Marcus carefully sealed the thorn in a specimen vial, labeling it. "This will prove tampering," he replied. "If we find more, we have a pattern." He glanced up, watching Syrah's face. Her expression was tight, determined. "We need to move quickly." Together they retraced the steps of the climbing trial. Marcus found the section Syrah had warned him about, the false handholds dusted with a subtle, corrosive compound. Someone wanted a fatal slip, he muttered, scraping a sample into another vial. Syrah's jaw clenched at the evidence. As the sun crested the horizon, they entered the maintenance hall beneath the amphitheater. The space was empty save for the hum of machinery and the distant voices of servants beginning their morning routines. Syrah disabled the surveillance glyphs with a practiced flick, and Marcus accessed the ship's recorder, replaying the audio he had secretly captured during the vision trial. Distorted, but clear enough, the elders' voices, their intent to sabotage. Syrah nodded with grim satisfaction. This is enough. We have physical evidence and a confession. Now we bring it to the council. The council chamber was already buzzing with tension by the time Marcus and Syrah entered, evidence secured in a satchel at Marcus's side. Elders clustered in small groups, their voices clipped and anxious. The younger Nithari, those who had watched Marcus's trials with hope, filled the benches along the walls. Elder Rin sat at the head of the council, her silver tattoos gleaming in the lantern light. As Marcus and Syrah stepped into the circle, silence swept the room. Marcus spoke first, projecting his voice across the ancient stone. We come with proof that the sacred trials have been corrupted. The evidence is here: tainted thorns from the Mirrolith, sabotaged climbing gear, and a recording of the elders' own words. A ripple of shock ran through the assembly. Elders shifted in their seats, some pale with fear, others flushed with anger. Syrah stood tall beside Marcus, her presence radiating authority and conviction. She raised her voice, addressing her people directly. We have always believed the trials were a test of worth. But those in power have twisted them for their own ends. Today, we bring the truth. You must decide what kind of society we will be. From the benches, Lyra stepped forward, her coppery skin glowing with determination. I stand with Syrah and Marcus. The future of the Nithari demands justice. Jalen, a broad-shouldered warrior, whose loyalty was earned in battle, joined her, laying a hand on his sword's pommel. As do I. Let none harm them. If the elders wish to silence truth, they answer to us. The chamber erupted in argument, elders clamoring for order, voices overlapping in a storm of accusation and disbelief. Elder Reen's composure cracked. She rose, voice sharp and desperate. These are lies, enemies of tradition. Seize them, now! Marcus felt a tremor of dread, but Jalen stepped between them and the council guards, his stance unyielding. No one touches them, not until the evidence is weighed by all. The assembly fractured into chaos. Some elders called for loyalty to tradition, while others, led by Malus, Reen's long-standing rival, raised their voices in favor of a new path. If there is doubt, let it be settled before all, Malus declared. A final test, public and uncorrupted. Let the people witness truth. Syrah met Marcus's gaze across the din, her eyes burning with fierce hope. We've started something that cannot be stopped, she whispered. They'll do anything to hold on to power. Marcus squeezed her hand, pulse racing. We finish what we started, no matter the cost. As the crowd continued to argue, the council reluctantly agreed to Malus's proposal. Arrangements began at once for a final public trial, one that could not be manipulated by the shadows of corruption. With the formalities swirling around them, Marcus and Syrah slipped away for a brief moment of calm. They found sanctuary in a quiet alcove near the outer wall, the muffled echoes of chaos drifting through the stone. Syrah's hand found his, her grip tight and reassuring. I chose my side the moment I stood with you, she said, her smile fierce and unguarded now. There's no going back, not for me. Marcus traced her knuckles with his thumb, searching her eyes. You've given me more than a reason to fight. You've shown me what hope looks like. Their feelings, once tentative and unspoken, now surged between them, raw and undeniable, forged in the fire of adversity. But the Enclave was no longer safe. Loyalists still under Rin's sway began to scour the halls, searching for Marcus and Sira. Whispers of betrayal swept through the corridors. Sira led Marcus through a labyrinth of hidden tunnels, her childhood knowledge guiding them beneath the city's foundations. The passageways twisted in darkness, roots threading overhead, the air thick with the memory of secrecy. At a fork, they pressed together, barely enough space to turn. Marcus felt Sira's warmth, her heartbeat quick and steady. He reached for her, voice a low whisper. "We'll make it through this, I promise." Sira brushed her lips against his ear, her breath stirring the hairs at his nape. "If we fall together. But I won't let them win." The sound of boots echoed above, guards searching, their voices harsh. Sira led them onward, her every choice precise. Time and again her instincts saved them, ducking into a side passage moments before patrols passed, using coded glyphs to disable traps. Marcus trusted her completely, following the surety in her movements, the fire in her spirit. At last, they emerged from the tunnels beneath the open sky, the roar of falling water guiding them. The Liran Falls loomed ahead, a cascade of crystalline water plunging into a mist-veiled basin. Here, at the edge of the world, Sira and Marcus paused, catching their breath, the adrenaline of escape slowly giving way to resolve. He reached for her hand, feeling the strength and softness that had guided him through every trial. She met his gaze, her own fierce with determination and love. "We seize the last proof here," Sira said, nodding toward the falls. "After that, justice." Marcus squeezed her hand, the promise between them silent but absolute. The falls thundered on, a symbol of all they had endured, and all they were about to risk for the truth. Before dawn, Marcus and Sira infiltrated the council spire, moving in tandem through the sleeping heart of the Enclave. The world was hushed in blue, the corridors empty save for the muted flicker of bioluminescent glyphs pulsing along the walls. The air was sharp with anticipation, every shadow seeming to tremble with the promise of change. They moved as one through the shadowed library, footsteps silent on the polished stone. Marcus's nerves thrummed with adrenaline, his senses sharpened by danger and by the presence of Sira at his side. She navigated the labyrinth of shelves and alcoves with certainty, her every motion precise, guided by memories from a childhood spent in the spire's hidden corners. At the far end, they reached a heavy door etched with council sigils, Rhine's private chamber. Sira pressed her palm to a concealed panel, muttered a phrase in the old tongue. The lock clicked open. Marcus slipped inside first, scanning for threats, then beckoned her forward. Stacks of ledgers and data crystals lined the walls, a wealth of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Sira moved straight to a battered volume bound in midnight blue leather. She pulled it free, fingers trembling. "This is it." Rin recorded everything by hand, believing it safer than digital files. Marcus opened the ledger, his eyes skimming the dense script. Page after page detailed sabotage, the tampered trials, the bribes, the names of those cast out to protect the council's grip on power. "It's all here," he whispered, scarcely believing the weight of the truth in his hands. They turned to leave, but a figure blocked their path. Elder Rin, his form silhouetted by the faint glow from the corridor, stepped into the room. His eyes were hard, lips pressed into a thin line. "So, the traitor and her human. I wondered how long it would take you to stoop to thievery." Marcus squared his shoulders, Sira close beside him, her hand resting on the hilt of her ceremonial blade. "We're here for justice, not vengeance. The trials were never meant to destroy Rin. You made them into weapons." Rin's voice was icy, but Marcus heard the tremor beneath the anger. "You know nothing of what's required to hold a society together. Tradition is all that stands between order and chaos." "Tradition twisted by fear is just control," Marcus shot back. "The ledger speaks for itself." Sira's eyes blazed with fury and hurt. "You corrupted everything the Nithari stood for. How many lives did you ruin to protect your own power? Rin's posture faltered as footsteps echoed in the hall. Malus entered, flanked by a handful of young warriors and counselors, their faces set with purpose. Lyra was among them, eyes fierce with hope. "It's over, Rin," Malus declared. "We heard your words in the trial, and now we see your record. The people demand truth." Marcus opened the ledger and began to read. His voice was steady, ringing through the chamber as he named names and crimes, exposing years of deceit. The words hung in the air like a cleansing storm, shattering the web Rin had spun. The Nithari assembly listened, shock rippling through the crowd that gathered at the chamber's threshold. Gasps and murmurs gave way to a surge of anger and resolve. Syrah stood tall, her presence a pillar beside Marcus, her authority undeniable. Jalen stepped forward, his sword drawn but held low in peace. "You've lost, Rin. Surrender your rank and face judgment, or we will take you by force." Rin's resistance crumbled. He looked around, seeing the certainty in the faces of his former allies. With a bitter laugh, he removed the ceremonial torque from his neck, laying it at Malus's feet. "You will regret this," he spat, but the threat was hollow. Malus addressed the gathering, her voice clear. "Elder Rin is stripped of power and exiled. His closest conspirators will face trial. The era of secrecy ends today." Relief swept through the crowd. The younger Nithari, who had watched the trials with hope and trepidation, now rallied to Marcus and Syrah's side. Lyra embraced them both, tears streaking her cheeks. "You've given us back our future," she whispered. Malus turned to Marcus, her bearing regal. "The human has proven his worth, not by brute strength, but by heart, wisdom, and courage. No further tests are needed. Let the alliance be sealed." The council spire, so long a fortress of tradition and fear, became that morning a place of renewal. As the assembly dispersed to spread the news, Marcus and Syrah slipped away, finding themselves drawn to the highest terrace, where the sky blushed with the first rays of sunrise. They stood side by side, gazing out over a changed world. The city sprawled below, its towers bathed in golden light. Rivers of mist wound between distant mesas, the air crisp and full of possibility. "What now?" Marcus asked quietly, his arm brushing hers. The adrenaline of victory still hummed in his blood, but beneath it was a gentler wonder, a sense that anything might be possible. Syrah turned to him, her amber eyes glowing with hope. "Now we build something new, an alliance, born of truth. The Nithari will heal, and I will help guide them. With you, I want to see what's possible. Together, we can make the future our own." He marveled at her, the lines of her face illuminated by mourning. Gone was the wary guardian who had met him at the proving fields. In her place stood a leader, a partner, a woman unafraid to risk everything for what was right. Marcus drew her close, feeling the warmth of her body, the steady thrum of her heart. He traced the beauty mark beneath her eye, the metallic ports along her jaw, remembering every moment that had brought them here, each trial, each brush with death, each word spoken in darkness. "The trials were meant to break me," he murmured, voice rough with feeling. "Instead, they forged something unbreakable. Us." Syrah smiled, her expression fierce and tender all at once. "Together?" He nodded, pressing his forehead to hers, his hands framing her face. "Together," Marcus whispered, sealing the vow with a kiss as the sun climbed over the horizon, illuminating the world they would build, side by side, partners, lovers, and architects of a new dawn. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.